There are stories that promise salvation. There are stories that promise triumph. And there are stories that construct conflict as a temporary disruption in an otherwise hopeful world. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 does none of these things. Instead, it presents a world structured around inevitability, a society that does not fear death as an unknown horizon, but confronts it as an annual certainty. Each year, the Paintress inscribes a number, and each year, those who reach that number vanish. The mechanism is not chaotic, it's not emotional, nor erratic. It is purely systematic. It is ritualized, and it is accepted. Within this structure, Expedition 33 emerges not as a guaranteed solution, but as a continuation of resistance. The game does not frame the expedition as destiny fulfilled. It frames it as defiance enacted. And this distinction is crucial. The narrative is less concerned with whether the cycle can be broken, and much more concerned with how individuals live within the system that presumes their erasure. This video argues that Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is fundamentally a meditation on meaning under constraint. Its central themes, inevitability, repetition, agency, beauty, and presence, are not confined to narrative exposition. They're tightly woven through character arcs, environmental design, mechanical systems, and the musical composition. The result is a cohesive artistic work that interrogates how humans construct dignity when permanence is denied. The Paintress governs not through rage, but through arithmetic. Her annual inscription transforms mortality into policy. In doing so, the game reconfigures death from a metaphysical uncertainty into a bureaucratic boundary. And this structuralization of mortality alters the psychological landscape of the world. Citizens do not ask whether they will die. They ask when they will be invalidated. The horror lies in the predictability. The number represents an abstraction that overrides individuality. No plea, no merit, no distinction interrupts its authority. Philosophically, this reflects a broader tension between human subjectivity and systemic categorization. The Paintress's counting resembles institutions that reduce life to metrics. Ages, quotas, deadlines, and thresholds. In such systems, identity is subordinated to calculation. Yet the game doesn't present this tyranny as explosive or dramatic. It's quiet, orderly, and routine. And that quietness intensifies its power. Inevitability becomes normalized. By situating the narrative within this framework, Clair Obscur establishes its primary question. How does one exercise agency inside a structure that appears absolute? Expedition 33 is not introduced as prophecy fulfilled. It is introduced as sequence continued. Previous expeditions have failed. Their remnants populate the world. The journey undertaken by the protagonist is neither unprecedented nor assured. And this repetition reframes heroism. The expedition's significance does not derive from guaranteed success, but from conscious participation. the act of departure becomes an ethical stance. Existential philosophy provides useful context here. In a universe indifferent to human aspiration, meaning arises not from outcome, but from action. And the expedition mirrors this principle. Its members are aware of the risks, aware of historical precedent, and yet they proceed anyway. Their choice to act despite likely failure transforms the mission into a form of protest. It asserts that inevitability does not dictate behaviour. Even within constraint, one can refuse passivity. The game carefully avoids romanticising this refusal. Characters express doubt, fatigue, and apprehension. Their courage is not blind optimism. It is deliberative commitment. And in portraying this complexity, the narrative grounds its philosophy in lived psychology rather than abstract idealism. Repetition permeates the game structure. Annual inscriptions, sequential expeditions, recurring enemy patterns, iterative learning through combat. Initially, repetition appears oppressive. It suggests stagnation and futility. However, Clair Obscur complicates this interpretation by emphasising accumulation. Each failed expedition leaves traces. Equipment, ruins, environmental markers. The world becomes layered with attempts. And history is not erased, it is sedimented. And this sedimentation reframes repetition as archive. Although cycles persist, knowledge accrues, and failure contributes to collective memory. Mechanically, this theme is mirrored through combat design. Mastery emerges through repetition. Parry windows are learnt, and patterns are internalised. What once overwhelmed you becomes manageable. The player experiences progression not because the system changes, but because understanding deepens, and repetition becomes a vehicle for transformation rather than confinement. Thus, the game proposes a nuanced philosophy. Cycles can imprison, but they can also educate. The difference purely lies in engagement. The members of Expedition 33 represent varied responses to inevitability. They are neither archetypical saviours nor caricatures of despair. Instead, they embody distinct emotional postures toward mortality. Some approach the mission with solemn duty. Others rely on humour. And others reveal moments of hesitation. These differences are not contradictions. They are simply reflections of human diversity in confronting finitude. Importantly, the characters are aware of the expedition's history. Their resolve is informed rather than naive. And this awareness lends credibility to their commitment. Dialogue frequently circles questions rather than proclamations. Why proceed? What remains if they fail? And who benefits from their attempt? These conversations resist simplistic reassurance, and instead they invite contemplation. By embedding philosophical inquiry with interpersonal dynamics, the game ensures that its thematic concerns remain grounded, and the abstract tension between inevitability and agency becomes personal. The game's Belle Époque inspired aesthetic is not ornamental, it is thematic reinforcement. This historical period was marked by artistic flourishing, shadowed by instability, and its elegance carried an undercurrent of fragility. I Clair Obscur mirrors this tension. Environments are painterly and dramatic, suffused with contrast between illumination and shadow. Decay and refinement coexist. The title itself, Clair Obscur, meaning light dark, signals this interplay. The visual language communicates coexistence rather than resolution. Beauty persists in a world governed by erasure, and this persistence becomes an act of resistance. By crafting environments of aesthetic richness, the game asserts that impermanence does not nullify value. Beauty does not require eternity. It simply requires presence. And in this way, the world design articulates the game's central thesis visually. Meaning is constructed even when permanence is impossible. Combat in Clair Obscur blends turn-based strategy with real-time defensive inputs, and this hybrid system demands attentiveness. During enemy turns, players must dodge or parry, remaining engaged rather than passive. This design choice is philosophically significant. It denies detachment. One cannot simply issue commands and observe outcomes. One must respond actively. And parrying in particular symbolises defiance. It requires precision and risk. But when executed successfully, it converts vulnerability into an advantage. This mechanic mirrors the narrative stance. Inevitability cannot be removed, but it can be met skillfully. Agency is not the elimination of threat, but the quality of response. Thus, gameplay reinforces the theme. Engagement becomes both mechanical necessity and an ethical statement. The musical score deepens the thematic cohesion. Rather than relying solely on triumphant crescendos, it frequently inhabits melancholy, contemplation, and restrained intensity. Motifs recur and evolve, echoing the game's cyclical structure, and emotional tones linger, allowing space for reflection. Music validates the complexity of resistance. It acknowledges sorrow without collapsing into despair, and it sustains tension without demanding relentless urgency. In doing so, the soundtrack reinforces the philosophical premise. Courage is not the absence of grief, but persistence alongside it. At its core, Clair Obscur Expedition 33 advances a philosophy of presence. The inevitability of erasure does not absolve individuals from engagement. Instead, it heightens the significance of action. presence becomes ethical because absence would signify surrender. To participate, whether in combat, exploration, dialogue, or aesthetic appreciation, is to assert humanity without constraint. The game suggests that meaning is not contingent upon breaking the cycle. It may reside in standing within it and acting deliberately. This perspective offers a subtle but profound lesson. Victory is not the sole measure of worth, and participation carries its own dignity. Clair Obscur, Expedition 33, achieves cohesion by aligning narrative premise, character psychology, aesthetic design, mechanical systems, and music around a unified philosophical inquiry. It does not guarantee resolution. It does not promise escape from inevitability. Instead, it invites players to inhabit a world that's structured by constraint, and to choose engagement regardless. In doing so, it transforms a tale of annual erasure into a meditation on how humans live when permanence is uncertain. Its lesson is neither naive optimism nor fatalistic despair. It's deliberate presence. When time is counted and endings are scheduled, what remains is choice. And in that choice, meaning is painted, even against the inevitable. Thank you for joining me on a walk through the philosophy behind Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Please leave your comments below. Please like, subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.